Where there is no vision, there is no hope. George Washington Carver.
Bending Not Breaking, The Dragon Prince Edition, Season 3, Episode 3, Ghost. Welcome back to Bending Not Breaking. This is Ben Pruitt, your host for the Dragon Prince Edition, and I am very excited because with this new Dragon Prince season, we are trying something new where we are having some fun time with guests, and I'm really excited because what we're doing and what we're trying out is we are inviting our patrons from Patreon to be guests on this season, and our first guest from our patrons who is joining us is Kelly. And Kelly is pretty great. She joins us monthly, often monthly, for our live episodes with patrons, but also has graciously decided to join us for this episode of The Dragon Prince. So Kelly, welcome. I'm so glad you're here. How are you today?
Hey, thanks so much for having me, Ben. I'm so excited to be on the podcast. It's honestly fulfillment of a lifelong dream. Don't tell anybody though.
So a podcast or this podcast in particular?
Oh, I mean, I feel like I would say any podcast, but if I get to be on one, with people that I like to talk to and a topic that I enjoy, I feel like, that's ideal, right? That's
win-win situation, right?
Yeah, best possible scenario.
Yeah, well, this is awesome. I'm really grateful that you offered to join us. We were excited to kind of brainstorm Sunshine, and then we're talking about it. What if we tried this? We've been doing these monthly episodes for so long, and those conversations they offer so much that we were like, yo, let's just start inviting them. And here we are. You get to be the inaugural patron on our podcast, which is very exciting.
Wow.
I know, big deal. So this is big because you also got to choose the quote, you got to choose the lens, and I'm really excited to kind of hear about the lens you chose for this episode. What did you choose? Tell us about it. Why did you choose it? All that jazz.
Okay, so for Dragon Prince Season 3, Episode 3, Ghost, I chose the lens Vision, which I feel like is not super original, not reinventing the wheel or anything, but when I was kind of reading through a synopsis of the episode on the Dragon Prince Wiki, and I watched the episode, I was trying to find something that I thought could kind of tie in the different important plot points that are happening. And I liked Vision because, it's, the state of being able to see something, right? It's what you see. It's also thinking about or planning for the future with imagination or wisdom, reading from the Google definitions. But I really liked that it had multiple definitions. And then even looking at it as to have a vision is to imagine something, to look forward to something, to plan for something. So, and I thought that a lot of the characters that we see, throughout the series and this episode, they have a vision, and that kind of what propels them forward.
Yeah, I really love this concept of vision and the relationship between vision, imagination, and hope, right? And I think that there's something really beautiful about that, because in order to have hope, one must first have imagination, and that kind of combo is what creates a vision. It's what allows for planning. It's what allows for all kinds of stuff. So I'm really interested to see how that kind of picks up in this episode. There's a lot of really neat moments.
Yeah, I think so too.
Well, I not every listener who is listening right now has seen the episode within an amount of time that is adequate to remember all the fun little details, which means you, being our first patron guest, have the opportunity to remind everybody what's going on, which is my favorite because now I don't have to do it. You get to do a 30-second recap of the episode.
Okay.
How do you feel?
I wrote it down. I'm not gonna lie. I wrote stuff down.
Gotta remember, notes are fine.
Yeah, because there's a lot of different back and forth parts. So I tried to condense it. I don't know. I wrote it. I did not practice it though. I did not time it. So we'll see how fast I can say everything.
Yeah, no worries. Well, I'm gonna time you, and it may or may not happen. I'll give you a 10-second warning.
Okay.
All right. On your mark, get set, go.
Rayla and Callum go to the Silver Grove, where Rayla finds out she was ghosted. Hakatalis Ezrin tries to convince Prince Kasif that peace is possible, and Salir is being kind of shady. Viren meets with Claudia and Soren, where he gaslights Soren to keep Claudia's trust, and once they leave, Salir brings Prince Kasif to plot treason with Viren. Rayla and Callum seek out Athari, who allows them to speak briefly about her mission and what went wrong. Amaya, who was captured by the Sunfire Elves, has to stare into the light to be spared from death, and then Athari gives Rayla and Callum help to journey to reunite Zim with the Dragon Queen.
Oh, that was very good. You had 1 second to spare there. That was very nice.
Oh my gosh. I feel like I left out so much though. I was writing it and I was like, yeah, I'm not really saying why these things are happening. I'm just saying exactly what happens.
Yeah, I just am so excited to have all the patrons who decide to join us do this as an exercise so that so that they can know what it's like.
Yeah, I can't imagine doing one without having anything written down. Do you guys do them without writing anything down, or do you guys prepare when you have to do them?
Oh God, you're revealing our inner working.
Okay, if you don't want to tell me, you don't have to.
No, it's totally fine. It depends. Sometimes we do it off the cuff, and sometimes we have notes. It kind of depends on if we're doing... Sometimes we record multiple episodes at a time, and when that happens, it's really helpful to have notes because we sometimes get them confused.
Yeah, totally.
But if we are doing it like a one-off recording, oftentimes we'll wing it.
Yeah, I feel like if it's fresh in your mind, you can kind of just keep track, but I did not trust myself.
There's literally no way to capture 30 minutes. I guess it's more like 22 minutes of stuff in 30 seconds. That's kind of the whole point. You'll never be able to capture it all.
Yeah, that's fair.
So it goes. We can't win them all. But okay, this kind of brings us to the bulk of the episode. We're going to talk about some moments of vision. And, I'm going to toss it straight to you. What's a moment of vision that you kind of want to make sure we touch on first?
Okay, I feel do I want to go for what I think is the heavy hitter, or, I'll go for the nice part first. So,
yeah, well, just a little softball to start.
Yeah. So in this episode, Ezrin has been, in previous episodes, Ezrin has been meeting with Prince Kasif and his advisors and basically trying to convince them all that peace is possible. And he's invited Prince Kasif back to, the throne room. And, Prince Kasif, I thought it was really powerful that Prince Kasif says, "Did you have a change of heart?" And Ezrin says, "No, I'm going to tell you something that I hope will change your heart."
Yeah.
I just love that because I feel like Ezrin's vision for peace is so strong. And he says there can be peace again. We just have to believe it. And I feel like that, like you said earlier, that having a vision is really tied to your belief and hope, in that vision succeeding if you're willing to stay committed to it. And I think that it's really hard to see. I think it's hard to see. It's hard to see Ezrin be challenged so much by the adults around him. Or even Prince Kasif. I don't know if he's really a true adult. He seems kind of young. But it's hard to see him being challenged by, older people who are, honestly a little bit jaded and a little just have different life experiences than him. And I think that it's awesome that he is able to stand up for what he's decided is the right thing to do.
There are so many things I want to touch on from this scene, and I'm really glad you lifted it up because you're pointing us to a lot of really important conversations. So, okay, I'm going to start with what you ended on, and what you ended on was with this concept of adults being jaded, and Ezrin, who is what, like 8, 10?
Yeah.
I don't know Ezrin's exact age, I guess, but he's young. He is a super child, and oftentimes when younger people come up with this what seems to be naive outlook, oftentimes the adults just chalk it up to, oh, they're just young, they don't know what the world is like. They kind of write off children because they don't understand the world. And I see this a lot when, recently in Florida, for instance, with the Don't Say Gay bill, and there were hundreds of children that walked out of school recently to protest. And a lot of times these teens are like, oh, they're just teenagers, they don't understand. But they have a vision of a better future. And they're taking a stand because that's the only way they know how. And this is, like, I'm just seeing a real connection between Ezrin and that kind of movement here. Are you seeing a connection there too? Does that line up for you also?
Yeah, I definitely agree. I think that, we're really willing to write off, children and younger people because they don't have the same experiences. We think that they don't have enough experience. But it's kind of like they get to see things from the outside in a lot of ways. They get to see things without all the pain from the past, especially in the Dragon Prince, right? All the humans believe that, Zadia and, the elves, everyone has been kind of out to get them, since the war began. And they have all that pain that they carry with them. And I think that Ezrin's able to kind of have his vision clouded by that pain of the past. And I feel like you see that today with a lot of young people who are wanting to, quote unquote, break generational curses and not repeat, the same failures of the past, not, recommitting to pain and not continuing down that same road, whatever it might be for them.
Yeah. And you are a teacher, correct?
Yeah.
And so you work with young people, and I'm curious in your work with young people over the past several years, thinking about how, have you ever been the jaded adult in your classroom? And what is that like for you? Have you noticed that? And then I'm just curious if that's something that, because I know that when I was working with teens, there were definitely times where I was like, I'm reflected on it and realized that I was like, I'm a jaded adult. So I'm curious if that has ever popped up for you, or I'm just curious.
I feel like I work with elementary kids, so they're not as they're not having any existential crises usually yet, but it's usually not that I'm jaded, it's usually that I'm like, this is kind of the way things are, this is how things work. And they're like, well, why? And I'm like, well, that's how I was taught that it worked. And so that's kind of how I'm teaching you that it worked. And they're like, well, what if we didn't do it that way? And I'm like, you know what? Yeah, totally. We don't have to do it that way. How do you want to do it? Let's do it that way. Or, sometimes they'll just remind me that things that I considered to be, rules are considered to, I teach music. So I was teaching kids about the rules of music, because music has rules, and they're like, well, what if you just go like this instead of that? And I was like, oh, that'd be breaking the rules, but let's do it. Let's listen to what that sounds like. So I feel like it's just a reminder to not be so stuck on how things have been.
Yeah, and we see this with Opelli, we see this with all the adults in the room who are like, no, this is how it is supposed to go. And you notice that Ezrin, to this point, they keep on trying to teach Ezrin how to behave by saying, Prince Ezrin, we have this way. And then we see all of these jelly tart incident with Corvus, all these things that happened last episode, right? That are kind of trying to show Ezrin the way. And Ezrin is just super comfortable with doing it his way. And I find that to be really like, I think a lot of adults would see that as being obstinate or see that as being not okay. But to me, from this perspective, on looking from the outside in, I'm sitting there going like, you go, Ezrin.
Yeah, especially when it's not us. It's not, a kid telling us these things. I'm like definitely on Ezra's side, but I can definitely see circumstances where if, where it might go a different way. But I
Sure.
definitely root for Ezrin. And I like in the previous episodes that he just decides that even though he's not sure how things were done in the past, or he's not sure, he's just decided that he's going to do what he thinks is right. He's going to be himself.
Yes. Yes.
And I think that gives him a lot of strength.
Yeah. Well, and that kind of returns to this vision concept with Ezrin and Prince Kasif. If we kind of return to the beginning of that conversation, where Ezrin's trying to change Prince Kasif's mind here and show him a different vision of the future that he really believes in and sees that is possible, that Prince Kasif doesn't see. And oftentimes, I think this happens a lot in real life between real people, where if I have been hurt like Prince Kasif has, I am way more likely to judge. I am way more likely to jump to conclusions. I am like, the story that I'm telling myself is rooted in the pain, not rooted in the rest of the story. And we oftentimes tell ourselves an incomplete story without all of the information, because it confirms the bias that we have, right? Which Prince Kasif is like, Zadia did this. And this information is incomplete. But because that's the information he has, this is the only vision he sees of the future is to annihilate, because that's the only way he knows it. Whereas Ezrin has seen another future. He has made friends with Rayla, and all of a sudden that cultivates this hope for what could be that Kasif, of course, can't see, right?
Yeah.
And so part of me doesn't blame Prince Kasif either. And he's totally a little jerkwad, but at the same time, I don't necessarily blame him for it,
Yeah, no, I agree. And especially I was thinking, because I was, reading back about some of the other episodes and kind of how this season comes to a head. I won't say much about it, but given the history between, Zadia and the humans and everything that's happened, and on both sides, it's really hard. You can't draw a line. I don't think you can draw a line, be on one side or the other. You have to be able to see both perspectives. And I wonder I don't know if it really ever comes up, but I wonder, if there's room in Ezrin's vision to honor, the people who are angry, who do need some type of resolution, to what they perceive, the injustice that they perceive to happening. And I think that if we had a chance to explore, they explored that more in the episodes, I think that Ezrin would be the type of ruler to make room for that. But we don't really get to see it.
You know what you're lifting up for me is what's missing from Ezrin's plan. And I think what's missing from Ezrin's pitch to Prince Kasif is accountability for what has been done. Yeah. And I think that might be part of the rub for Prince Kasif is your vision is, a frou vision.
Let it go.
Right? Because I can't let this stand. This is something that there needs to be accountability for the fact that my father's almost dead, and that for the fact that there are two other monarchs that have been lost, right? And so I think that that's something that Ezrin doesn't necessarily communicate well, is saying, hey, we can have peace and hold people accountable, but that's not kind of what he's focused on. He's focused on this peace effort,
Yeah, it's almost, I feel like it's hard to get all that wrapped up, into a short sentiment, but maybe it's like, if we can just get a peace to hold, if we can get people to stop, getting their armies ready and stuff. Maybe we could talk it out. Maybe that's his goal. But yeah, we don't really get to see it. So yeah, I definitely agree that, Prince Kasif, he's not really reassured at all by what Ezran is saying. And even though I agree with Ezran, I still, you gotta kind of think about who you're talking to and, how you can help them come to your side. Well, and Ezran did. Oh, go ahead.
Well, I think that's exactly what it is what we're getting this vision of Ezran's future, which is really beautiful, but there's something missing. And it's the same thing for Prince Kasif. We have this vision of what needs to happen. There needs to be accountability for what has been done, but it's really lacking a lot of moral stability. And so how do we merge these visions together rather than say, no, I can't do what you're doing because it doesn't fit my bill, right? And it goes both ways. Like, I can't do what you're doing because it didn't fit my bill. How do we get to the yes where both people can say yes, right? And I think that's the conversation piece that's missing for creating collective vision. And I think that's something that we can learn from in the real world, is when we have two competing visions of the future, it's not saying, well, your vision doesn't fit mine, so we're going to just agree to disagree and never be able to talk again. No, it's, okay, let's talk about it. Let's get to the root of the issue here and see if we can come to a collective vision. I think that's something I would like to have seen if it were possible.
Yeah, I agree.
But so it goes. That's a very high expectation to have of a 10-year-old, I think.
Yeah, definitely. And he's just getting started. I mean,
yeah,
it's really only the beginning. And I think he's just trying to do his best at this point and stick to his guns, as they say.
Yeah, and one of the things I worry about also is for children and young people who have really high expectations of the world, like Ezran does, I think it leads to burnout faster, and I think it leads to not just burnout, but also like becoming jaded, right? I think it leads to these adults who are super judgy of the young because I had these high visions and they didn't work out, and I know they can't. Because after a while, if they don't work, then of course you're going to start to be judgy of them. But just because they didn't work out doesn't mean that they can't work out, right? And I think that's a fine line to navigate,
Yeah, it's like, how do you marry your vision with reality? How do you create? Because, vision is based on imaginativity, creativity. Like, how do you marry those things together to have a vision that can succeed and that honors the people who you want to be part of that vision? I feel like some people would say that's impossible. And I don't think it's impossible, but it's definitely requires a lot of thoughtfulness. It requires a lot of communication.
Yeah.
And probably compromise. I feel like that's in there too.
Yeah. Oof. Wow. So I feel like we've lingered on this moment for a hot minute.
Yeah, totally.
And there's so much there. Like, we could probably keep going, but let's for the sake of for getting to the rest of the episode, I wonder if there are other moments of vision that kind of spoke to you.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, jumping off of, Prince Kasif kind of willing to go to war, to basically wipe out Zadia, to basically, cement, humans' rule in this world. I feel like he's willing to sacrifice a lot of people and resources, a lot to win that. And that kind of brings me to another part that I really wrote a lot about when I was watching the episode, was how Viren and Erebos are still pushing towards their shared vision of uniting the Five Kingdoms against Zadia, going to war. And I thought it was interesting how, Soren and Claudia are like, why are you down here? What did you do? And he's like, I just broke some rules. And he was just talking about how you have to be willing to do certain things, to succeed, right? And it comes out in even worse ways when, he's asking how their missions went. Claudia needed to get the egg. Soren needed to get the princess. You can get however you want. And then they both failed. And, Claudia says Soren almost died. And Viren says that doesn't matter. He actually yells it. I'm not going to yell though, but he yells it. And then the animation is he lunges towards them. And his chain that he's chained to the floor, the chain pulls taut. Like he is getting to the end of, he's coming right at them to say, it doesn't matter. And he says, I would have wanted you to sacrifice my life, to complete these missions. And even further, he's willing to go so far that even when, Claudia accuses him, or she says, what about, you telling Soren to kill the princes? Erebos is in his ear saying, if you tell her the truth, you're going to lose her and you will need her later. Yeah. So, immediately he's thinking about his vision. He needs her as a pawn, and he needs to cut her, contact with Soren, basically. He needs to cut them apart to keep her. Yeah. And so he just straight up gaslights Soren so hard. Yes. It's so sad. And Soren, just being that he thinks that he is not special, he's not worthy, he just takes it like a champ. He doesn't even say anything.
This is a heartbreaking moment. Yeah.
Seriously. He doesn't, and it's just, Viren and, Erebos, they're so driven towards this vision that they have. Yeah. That they're willing to go, they're willing to go that far, even with his own children. Yeah. And with other people. It's just it's kind of scary. They're kind of, they're a scary duo because they don't have the same, moral compass that's keeping, our protagonists on the side of peace. Yeah.
Oh, wow. There are so many things we could talk about in this.
I know that was a lot. I just said a lot, but it was just so I was like, oh man.
Well, it's a nice, and it's streamlined, right? I think that you're giving us a really important streamline. Okay, I want to circle back to the very first moment you were kind of talking about there with Soren, Claudia, and Viren. And it's really even on their way down, Erebos whispers in Viren's ear and says, be careful. You gotta look the part. You're having visitors. And, I wonder what would happen if Soren and Claudia saw Viren without that butterfly having come down to the jail cell. I wonder if a true vision of what dark magic has done to Viren, if a vision of what he kind of has become without the mask, so to speak, if that would have made it harder for him to gaslight them, right? Yeah. So I'm wondering, kind of pulling on the metaphor here around what is that mask, right? Because Viren is continuing to utilize dark magic to make his appearance more acceptable. And this kind of turn for me is, metaphoric for his, this is the vision of what his soul actually looks like. And it's really interesting how it takes a toll on the literal body, and how our image is just as important for cultivating and creating a vision for the future as the vision we have literally in our minds. Does that make sense? I'm thinking about that, and I'm curious. What are your thoughts on that? I'm gonna pause. I haven't fully processed, so I'm just curious.
Yeah, I feel like Viren is, he not only has a personal vision, but he is trying to present a vision, right? He's trying to convince a lot of people that he is the right choice.
Yeah.
And I think what you said about how his appearance plays a role in that is, obvious. Because like you said, his appearance is degrading, the more he uses dark magic. And then he has to use magic to mask that. So I feel like if he didn't look normal, if he didn't look acceptable, if he didn't look, quote unquote good, whatever their standard of good and normal is, then it'd be a lot harder for him to sell what he's selling, which is that he's right, and that he's on the side of good. And I feel like at this point in his manipulation of his children, he and Erebos know that, like, they are not ready to see the truth.
No.
Like, and if they saw that, if anyone saw that, their plan would be, they'd be climbing up a hill 10 times steeper.
Yeah, for sure. So I'm thinking about this and what is the, real world equivalent for us. And what's coming to mind is, the dark magic at work that when I go to work and I am trying to survive at work, oftentimes what happens is I am putting on a mask in front of my boss, in front of my coworkers, in order to make it seem like I'm okay. And what that looks like is I am, oh, everything's fine. I'm doing great. Everything's lovely. And then at home I'm crying because I can't keep up. I can't do this anymore. And we're doing this kind of in the name of shame. Like, I will lose them if they see me at my worst. If they see my real self, if they get a vision for what it's like to really be me, then I will lose them. And that's kind of the shamefaced fear of being unlovable or like we won't belong. But for Viren, I don't think that's what's happening. I think that for Viren, this is, I will not be able to use them, and I will not be able to achieve my vision if I lose them. Right?
Yeah.
So,
I don't think he has any qualms with his appearance, especially later in the season. I don't think he's trying to hide. He's not trying to hide it to, like, for himself to look normal.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm really, really curious about this because it's so dirty. It makes me feel dirty. Okay. I lost my train of thought. But it just...
That's okay. I interrupted you a little bit, so that's my fault.
It's just a super ew moment, I think. I just really loathe to think that... And I think we all do this in a way. And I think we do it for different reasons, right? And so some of us are scared of losing people that we feel connected to, and it's shame. Some of us don't want to share because if they see us, then, like... I'll get fired from my job, so that's part of it. Like, if I don't keep up appearances and make it look like I'm, top dog, then I'm gonna get fired. Or other reasons are this vision concept. And I think that anytime we put vision ahead as, like, our highest ethical framework, we are fraught with peril because we see what Viren is willing to do in order to achieve this vision. And I think when vision is the top priority at the expense of family, at the expense of humanity, at the expense of lives, I think that there's something really not okay about that.
Yeah, actually you said exactly what I was going to say, is that, when we focus on, a facade, or we focus on, pushing forward a vision to others, and we lose our humanity. And I feel like anybody who has ever made a genuine connection knows that your humanity is your biggest tool of, compassion and communication with other people. And that's what brings people in, is seeing that you're real, right?
Yeah.
And seeing that human side of you rather than trying to cover everything up. Trying to cover things up so that people will think something specific of you, whatever you're trying to portray. Because then it's not real. I definitely feel like Viren's not being real, but when is he really ever? So
good question. Yeah. I forgive me for tying this to a conversation about religion, but I think that this is probably one of the main things that I find really terrifying about religion in general, is anytime people are using one person's view of like salvation, which is what saves us, and sometimes that vision, is, we will all go to heaven if you only accept Jesus Christ, if you're, for instance, if for a Christian perspective. And what's really interesting there is one of the like checks and balances involved in church concepts is that no one person should be able to be the voice of any religion. And what they do is they instead have what is called like the church at large to offer like this checks and balances. And so when people are having community and are able to create what we kind of discussed between Ezrin and Kasif, what create this shared vision, all of a sudden what happens is it checks out against other people's visions. And what we see Viren doing is actively shutting down other visions of the future that don't align with his. And that kind of not allowing conversation is exactly what happens and what leads to the Holocaust. It's exactly what leads to all of the genocides and things, because my shared vision, or rather my not shared vision, my vision is the vision, and anything else needs to die, frankly. And so this is what we see Viren do, and it's just really dangerous. And so I'm kind of making that real world connection there. And thinking about what is at stake when we don't allow for other people's visions to merge with our own.
Yeah, I mean, I feel like so many, I can think of like a million political intrigue shows where there's some line about how, do you see everybody who criticizes you as, opposition, as an obstacle that you need to remove, is one word of dissent, like meaning that you need to take out, that entire section of people. Yeah. So I feel like it's a lesson to be learned, and I feel like we hope that we're learning it, but it requires a lot of self-reflection.
Yeah.
Not everybody has that.
Absolutely. Yes. And I'm glad you used the word gaslighting, because this is like prime example of gaslighting 101 with Viren and Soren. Like it's so bad. It's so bad. If you ever need an example of what gaslighting is, everybody, this is an excellent example. And by excellent, I mean terrifying, because it clearly works.
I know. And Claudia just drives the nail home. She says, "Aw, Sorbear.
Yeah.
It's a good thing that you messed up the mission that you thought you had."
Yeah.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Well, and I think
just makes Soren question everything.
Well, and I think Claudia believed Soren. And when Viren does this, he leans on everything that Soren feels shameful about. The fact that he's not that smart, the fact that he already felt a lot of shame for saying yes in the first place, and he just writes Soren off. This is the moment he lost Soren.
Yes.
Like, if we were to point to any moment, there were moments before that could, but he could have kept Soren on his team. But this is the moment he lost him, I think.
Yes, I agree. I think he basically knew that Claudia would be more helpful later.
Yeah.
And decided that he didn't need Soren really, like, yeah, basically, oh gosh.
Right?
Just thought that Soren would be too stupid to even ever, go against him.
Yeah.
That he would never. Yeah, it's just so sad.
Yeah, it's tragic.
And it just tells Soren that he can't trust himself.
Yeah.
And it takes him a long, I feel like it takes him
the rest of the season.
But I feel like after, yeah, well, I mean, I feel like he does make some choices to kind of try to right the wrongs later, but ultimately, yeah, he's not sure what course of action to take because he can't trust himself, and he knows he can't trust his dad anymore.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, it's so tragic.
Yeah.
Okay. Can we go to Rayla and this moon shadow experience that we have?
Yes.
I'm really interested in the concept of exile and banishment as making the choice to not see someone.
Yeah.
Right? And it's so interesting for me. And there's this vivid memory I have of reading a book scene where someone gets banished, and I don't remember the book, and it's driving me wild. But it really made me think of this. But there's this, to be in the presence of and to literally not be seen is like my worst nightmare.
Yeah.
Right?
I mean, and they took it so literal. Not just in that,
Yeah.
People are ignoring
Yeah.
you, but like so literal.
Yeah, it's terrifying. And, I think a lot of people would be like, no, this is an ideal situation where I could walk through the world and be invisible. And I think that's oftentimes true if we are the subject of bullying or the subject of a lot of torment and pain, and we experience pain with people. But I think long term, the decision, this is like almost worse than, I was going to say it's worse than dying. And I think that depends on the situation. But like depending on who you are, this could be worse than dying.
Yeah.
And
I mean,
go ahead.
Oh, sorry, go ahead. Okay. I mean, yeah, some people, I guess, if they came back home and they realized that nobody could see them, they'd be like, oh, thank God, I didn't want to be known by these people anyways. But I feel like for Rayla, her connection to her village and to the people there, that raised her, that was really special to her. And I feel like she spent like ever since her mission and spent all that time working towards what she's achieved now. Seeing her so excited to go back home, and to bring Callum there and to, try like the desserts and to show all her favorite places, and then to realize that, they've basically blocked her out. And Callum knows too that she doesn't deserve that.
Yeah.
I was going to say she feels she doesn't deserve that. But I mean, I feel like she knows in her heart that she did what's right because she spent 2 seasons basically reconciling that.
Yeah.
Reconciling her choices, and then to come back and realize that they punished her for the story that they told about her without her being there.
Yeah.
I feel like that's just heartbreaking.
Again, it's this idea of something happens, we tell a story, and that story is inherently incomplete because we don't have all the information, and we make decisions that really drastically affect the mental health of other people that we care about, that matter. And I just find that to be really sad.
Yeah. I mean, and I think we write stories about people without even knowing
we do.
it.
Yeah.
Without even realizing that maybe we hadn't considered their side, or we hadn't considered all the factors. And I feel like what we know about Rayla is that before she went on that mission, it was already, you know, people were already kind of unsure about her because of her parents, because of what happened. And so basically, I think that they thought their suspicions were confirmed true. You know, that she wasn't brave and that she decided to abandon, you know, her team just like her parents did.
Yeah.
Rather than giving her, you know, any, I don't want to say benefit of the doubt, because obviously people lost their lives. It was a big deal. You know, it wasn't just a little thing. But without, you know, being generous to the fact that she's part of their family and she lost people too.
Exactly. Yeah. It didn't just happen to everybody back home. It also happened to Rayla.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So I feel like it's just sad. And, you know, and seeing her, you know, be like, oh, we'll go to Athari. Athari would never cast the spell. He always, you know, cared for me, you know, and then to see that he did, man.
Yeah.
That's rough because, I mean, that was like, you know, father figures in her life.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, and it's also interesting too because I think what strikes me as this being such a devastating thing is that to be seen is what we kind of long for in terms of you know, it's one thing to be seen and like literally, oh look, there's somebody over there, but to like be seen as in, you know me, you know who I really am. And I think that's what makes this with Athari really, really scary, right? Because he knew her, right? He knew her at her core and then believed that this is how this would go. And that to me signals that there was something missing, or there was, and not just that, but also signals that there was pain involved. And oftentimes when we are in pain and we are, I don't think we have as open a mind and we are as willing to be forgiving, right, than when we aren't. And so I wonder if this hadn't been Runan on this mission and had it been someone else that wasn't his husband, would he have made the same decision? Yeah. Right? Like, and
I honestly think the answer is if it wasn't Runan, he wouldn't have done that to her.
Yeah, I don't know that he would have either. I think that pain clouds our vision. And I think that's something that is worth kind of keeping with us as we think about, and like, let's go back to Prince Kasif, right? Pain was clouding his vision. It didn't allow him to see a possible peace thing, right? A vision of peace. And so I think that might be something like a self-awareness piece for us to consider. Like, okay, I'm in pain. I need to process this before I make any decisions, right? I wonder if that's something that we can kind of use as a filter for our decisions moving forward when it comes to acting on our vision for the future, you know?
Yeah, because it's really easy to make that split-second decision to be like, nope, I'm done, or no, I don't want to see that person ever again, or no, I won't consider this other option.
Yeah, you know what it reminds me of? It reminds me of like breaking up with a significant other and then immediately going to dye your hair and then regretting it the next day. Right?
Right, yes. Yeah, because you're like, I need a solution. I need to fix this.
Yeah. Yes. Anyway, I think, it's devastating.
Yeah. Ugh. And I mean, I appreciate that Athari, after seeing Rayla, you know, in the reflection of the sword, comes down, you know, and, you know, casts that spell that allows them to see each other and allows him to hear her side of the story. I feel like, one, that's really good. That's really nice of him. And I think that was the right thing to do. But then also, you know, when she shares, you know, why she did what she did, you know, he doesn't push back and say, but you should have did this, or you should have did this, or blah, blah, you know. He just, I mean, he just takes it for what it is. And, their goal, the Moonshadow Elves, their vision had always been the same, was to basically right the wrongs of the past in what way they saw fit, and getting the egg and the Dragon Prince back to the Dragon Queen. Like, he's on board with that now. He's like, okay, this is what we're doing now. I'm on board. I will help you.
Yeah. And I think this is the example that we wanted from Ezran and Prince Kasif, where he had this vision. Rayla had a vision. He was unwilling to hear it because he wrote her off. But then he was like, hold on, let's talk. Let's figure out. Let's come to a consensus so that we can get closure, right? I think that was his kind of goal, was to get closure on this. He he needed something because he lost his beloved. And I think that his desire for closure is what allowed them to come to this moment where they could communicate and actually merge their vision, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think maybe for Prince Kasif, like, he wasn't at that, not a lot of time had passed. He wasn't at that moment yet.
Yeah.
Where he could, he could be heard, let his, speak to his pain, but then also make an informed choice. But then at the same time, I don't know if he was necessarily given, like, space to be heard either. I'm not sure, I don't want to, like, put blame on anybody, but yeah, maybe that's what Prince Kasif needed. He needed to be heard. Like you said, accountability. And maybe with Rayla and Athari, maybe because because they already ghosted, they already turned her into a ghost or whatever whatever they did, maybe because that had already happened, Athari was able to kind of, thaw that cold shoulder towards her a little bit, because that had already happened.
Yeah. Yeah. I also, I'm digressing, or not digressing. I'm just taking a slight left for a second. And I'm going to this, like, the idea of getting into this, being able to see the hidden home in the first place, and the idea of Rayla and Callum had to do this dance. What it reminded me of kind of the dance of the dragons to get in from Avatar. It reminded me
it totally is.
And it wasn't exactly the same, but it reminded me of that. And I find it really interesting that it requires an act of body to change what the mind and what the eye can see. And it's really interesting. Like, it implies that, like, action and taking action with our bodies affects what we can see. That's the metaphor that I'm tracking there.
Yeah.
And I'm curious, does that make sense tell me about that. How does that resonate with you?
What it made me think of, which I don't know if this is exactly what you were thinking of, but it makes me think of, like, how we don't really understand people. We don't really understand other places until we go there, or until we connect. Oftentimes, like, in a physical way, whether that being physically in a place, or physically doing something with our body, or so I feel like that's what that made me think of, is that you just don't really, it will change how you see something when you interact with it on another level.
Yeah. I think what it reminds me of is thinking about how, like, I understand a lot of things on an intellectual level, but when it comes to actually doing the practices, and an example of that is, like, meditation. I know that meditating for 10 minutes a day would drastically benefit my mental health. I intellectually understand this. And in order to really know and believe in it, and I need to actually do it with my body. And so I think I would see the world differently, literally, if I did that, even though I intellectually understand it now. all. And I kind of track it with that kind of a concept also. You know,
Yeah, I totally
right?
agree.
And it made me think about Vision when I saw them dancing. I was like, oh, body, that's important.
Yeah, I mean, and then this episode, like, I mean, I feel like I chose Vision, and we're talking a lot of the deep stuff, but it's also like just what are they seeing, you know? And they're kind of, you know, through that dance, they're unlocking the ability to see, you know, this magical place that Rayla grew up in, and you know, Callum is like amazed. You know, it's picturesque.
It's
It looks
gorgeous. I'd
beautiful.
love to live there.
Yeah, looks awesome.
Yeah, there's a lot of cool things. Speaking of like seeing things and catching things, I don't know that maybe it just like was subconscious for me last time, but this with all of these like magical flowers that are beacons for the lives that may or may not be lost for the assassins when they leave. I think I realized this before, but for some reason it hit me differently this time to see that one was kind of like still floating, but floating underwater and still like subtly blinking. Did you catch that? It was a really, really like 1 second clip. But you know, it's interesting to think about what happens when they go into the coin. Are they alive? Are they not alive? But it seems like they're half alive. It's.
I know. I'm like, I know. It's such a mystery that we really don't get the answers to.
Yeah.
And I mean, honestly, when I saw that though, I was like, man, Athari didn't just like, you know, scope out the fountain a little bit more or the pond. You know,
that's what I wanted.
Take a double check.
Look in.
You know, because then he would have seen that there's hope, right?
Yeah.
He would have seen that there's hope, and then maybe he wouldn't have, you know, assumed the worst of Rayla.
Yes.
Or I guess he didn't really assume the worst of her, but he wouldn't have, I don't think he would have made the same choices if he had that little bit of hope, seeing that one of the flowers was not totally sunken.
I wonder if that's ever happened before, right? And it's one of those things where like, oh, well, if they're not on the WAP, then they're just gone, and because that's how it has always been in the past. But like, there's this, like, I really love this idea that hope is just a little bit below the surface if you're willing to look for it. And I think that's how it is with our visions too. Like, our vision is clouded by our, if we just took one more step and looked and maybe like, oh, there's a leap of faith. And some people would be like, oh, you're kidding yourself. That's never happened before. And you know what I mean? But then if he did look, it's all of a sudden it's like, no, in this case, it's true. And sometimes I think a lack of hope also, it's kind of I don't know what the word is. There's a relationship that vision is this combination of imagination and hope. And I think when you lack hope, it's because you couldn't even imagine a situation in which that flower might be just floating underwater. Right? So there's no way to see a future in which it could be otherwise. Anyway, I digress. But I thought that was interesting.
Yeah, totally. I mean, I feel like, and I just lost my train of thought too. But I feel like, yeah, like you said, excuse me, if that Athari had just looked a little deeper, if he had just reached out a little bit more, he would have seen that, and that would have, you know, helped
made
a
all
lot.
the difference.
That would have helped a lot. Yeah.
Okay. I want to be mindful of our time. Are there any other big moments or little moments that we want to make sure we hit on before we take a short break?
I think that's it for me. I think we hit some really good points that were most important to me.
Well, I guess we didn't talk really about Amaya and this giant like son of a scepter thing that she had to look into, but
that's true.
I think that's my last thing is this. It's really interesting, the metaphor there of like, okay, this light is so dang bright that I'm gonna see everything about this person, right? And when that happens, all of a sudden, oh, how ironic, a human with a pure heart, lock her up anyway. And I'm just like, seriously? You? But anyway,
I
it
know.
is what it is.
Oh, and I wondered, like, Janai wanted Amaya to be spared because Amaya had spared her, right?
Yeah,
so
good point.
She helped her overcome that light. But then, they just threw her back in prison. And I was like, what's Janai's vision for why she wants to keep Amaya? Because, the queen, Kessa says, enjoy your pet, right? She says, enjoy your pet. Like, so I kind of wonder what the thought process was there. But I think it was kind of off the, not off the cuff, but it was just that I don't think she deserves to die.
Yeah, it was also, like, this idea of she dehumanizes Amaya, like, by calling her, like, enjoy your pet, right? And it's really frustrating for me that you literally have the ability to see whether someone is of pure intention and is of pure heart, and then you're going to not listen to it, and you're going to then continue to dehumanize. It just is a signal of so much prejudice that it's like, I have this thing that I thought was going to kill you because I don't have any faith that any human is able to survive. And then when you do survive, it's like, I still don't have faith. Lock him up to be a little pet. It's just, it shows and illustrates such disdain. And I really struggle with that a little bit, because I'm like, if you have this tool that you rely on, why not rely on it?
Oh, yeah. That's such a good point. Well, I mean, I feel like this in the story they're trying to illustrate that, the Sunfire Elves, they're not tolerant, right? I feel like they're trying to illustrate that. They're trying to illustrate this gray area of the story that both sides have people that really give their side a bad name. And then they have people, like Rayla, like Janai, that are kind of showing, no, it's not the same. And then people, like Callum, like Ezrin, that are showing, it's not,
so beautiful.
Not everybody's
and
like
it's so
that.
real.
So it's, I mean, I feel like it is kind of frustrating, because you're like, she has a pure heart. That's a pretty big deal, right? And Amaya's great. But I feel like, in the story, that's just the fact, is she hates humans.
Yeah. That's too real for me. I don't like it, because like I just, like, if I had that staff, I'd be like, all right, everybody look into the light, and if you're here, you're on my little posse. But what that tells me is, even if we had that, there would still be things that are going wrong. Even if we have a tool that can literally do what that tool does, there would still be problems. And so it just reminds me that there's no, like, magic bullet, if you will, that would solve everything.
Yeah, totally.
Okay. All right. Let's do this. Let's take a short break, and we will let some music enter the lives of our listeners, and we'll come back shortly thereafter and dive into our final couple of segments. All right, everybody, welcome back. We're so glad that you're still with us. Kelly's still here, so that really just makes it all the better for you to stay and listen up, because we are diving into our final two segments for our Dragon Prince edition. And this first one, for those of you who are new because you just wanted to hear Kelly talk, is the Lens MVP. And we are choosing the character in this episode that really embodies the lens. And this doesn't mean that they were, the best person in terms of character or morality, but the one who really just embodied this lens and had something to do with it. And so Kelly and I have chosen 2 nominees for the Lens MVP. You, of course, can vote on who you think is better, and you can also send in your own nominees at BNB_pod at all the things. You can also email us at thearkofe@gmail.com. But anyway, I digress. Kelly, who did you choose for your Lens MVP?
Okay, I went for, obviously, King Ezrin, because...
Okay, good choice.
1, he's awesome. 2, he's awesome. No, I'm just kidding. But I thought...
Agreed.
I just love that he has a vision for what the future could be that is not, not clouded by the pain of the past. And it's his own family. Yeah. It's literally his family. It's not somebody else's family. It's tied to his story.
Yeah.
And he still chooses peace. Even though there are other people around him who do have pain, like Prince Kasif, his father almost dying, who are not at that point, which I think is okay. But I love that Ezrin, even though it was literally his father that died, it was his mother, or Callum's, anyway, oh man.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Yeah, their mother. Yeah.
Yeah, their mother. I could have just said that. But it's his family, and he still decided that what's most important is peace, so that they can stop sacrificing people's lives for this cause. So, yeah.
Yeah, I there's a lot here for sure. And I really like this one because also one of the things that I think that King Ezrin does in this episode with his vision is make it so that everybody who's like watching it can also lean into that as a possibility, right? It's giving us hope for a future of peace, right? It's showing us that it's possible, and I think I admire him for that. So I think that's a really good option that you've lifted up for us.
Yes, thank you for sending it home with that. Anyway, so this is why my choice should win if there was a hypothetical winner.
Well, I disagree because my choice is clearly the MVP for the episode. I am choosing a character that only said like 3 lines, and I'm choosing Erebos. Now, hear me out.
Gasp.
Okay, hear me out, because I think that Erebos is the one who is seeing most everything clearly. I think that he is clearly malevolent, but I think that his vision of what is probably the most accurate. We see him know, like, he can be more than one place at a time because of his caterpillar self, as well as his what we'll call like his spirit self, right? And he's able to realize that people are visiting Viren. He's able to know that how they will respond and predict how they would react. He's able to see a larger future and play chess with Viren as his pawn and know and be able to plan around Viren. I think that Erebos has a very clear and direct path that he is acting on using Viren as a little tool. And I think that he does it flawlessly. And that is the reason I think Erebos should win the MVP award for Vision. Thoughts?
I mean, you're right. He is probably the strongest player in the game, which is scary. Also, do you think he's playing both sides? Do you think he's playing both sides? Because isn't he an elf?
Yeah. No, I think it's super interesting because we don't know for sure. I don't think we know for sure that Erebos was the elf that gave Baird the dark magic originally.
That's what I was thinking.
I think it's pretty strongly theorized by the fandom that the reason Erebos is locked up is for giving humans dark magic.
Yeah.
Of course, we could of course be wrong, but I think he has been plotting this for a long, long time, and I think he's got a very clear vision of getting free, and I think that's what he's acting on, and Viren's just a little tool in the toolbox to make that happen.
Oh,
that's
absolutely.
Right? So, that's my suggestion. I think that I clearly should have Erebos win, but, I don't do all the voting, so we're just going to have to let our listeners decide. We'll definitely post a poll in Patreon after this airs so that everybody who's a patron can vote. But also on social media, you should check us out and follow us anyway, and then interact with us more, because we'll interact with you if you interact with us, because clearly we don't post enough as it is, because, we are working people, and social media is the bane of my existence. That being said, we still like interacting with people if you interact with us. So we're there. We just don't post as much as we would like. So it goes. Anyway, I digress. Let's move on. Let's move on to the gratitude segment, which is, one of the better segments that we do, I think. Who are you grateful for, Kelly? I'm curious.
I'm so grateful for the privilege of going first in both of these, because I get some really strong picks. But I'm grateful for Athari, Runan's husband. Because I'm just glad that I'm glad that he's holding up a sword and he can see Rayla's reflection and he can see that she's there. I'm glad for that moment to happen. But I'm just glad that he decides that hearing her side of the story about what happened is important, and that he comes to understand why she did what she did, and then comes to aid her and Callum, on their quest to reunite Zim with his mom, and shoots that message off at the end of the episode to the Dragon Queen. He offers them 2 steeds to be on their way. So I'm just thankful that he did not let, his judgment of Rayla before, impact the chance that he had right now.
Yeah. I love all of that. Yeah.
Oh,
Side note, I think that if I had one power that I could take from the series, it would be the ability to shoot those messenger arrows, because they're so cool.
Right? They are so cool.
Who would ever choose to send an email when you could fire a dragon-shaped arrow into the sky that's guaranteed to fly all the way to your target? I think that's super dope.
Just at the office, there's flaming birds all over the place.
Yeah. How about super cool memos from now on? That's all I'm saying.
It would liven things up. It would make things more interesting.
Yeah, I'm here for it. That's all I'm saying. Anyway, I digress.
Who did you choose?
Yeah, good. Thank you for circling back to the purpose of our conversation. I chose Soren, and part of it is just I'm in a little pity party for Soren, because I know what it is like to be in his situation where someone you love and care about has kind of grabbed your heart from inside you, and then ripped it from you, and you aren't exactly sure how they did it because you haven't fully processed it in the moment. And all you know is that you're in a lot of pain. And I think that that's what this moment with Viren embodies for me, is this, that he doesn't know why he's right. He hasn't quite processed it fully yet, because frankly it's traumatic and it's terrifying. And then to have it kind of thrown in your face, I think what I'm grateful for is that there's so much humility in Soren, and he is so good at heart, and he wants to do good, and that's all he cares about, and then it is being used against him. And I think that's why I'm grateful. I'm grateful that he is so good, and I'm really sad that people are taking advantage of his goodness, and it makes me mad.
Yeah, and the care and love that he has for his dad and his sister. Like he doesn't want confrontation with them. He wants to support them, but then but then some stuff happens. So
there's so much there.
Yeah.
Okay. We want to know from you all, if you're listening and you're interested, who you would choose to be grateful for in this episode. And remember, you can always tweet at us, Instagram us, DM us on all the things at BNB_pod. We're also on Patreon. Obviously, our patrons have some cool perks to choose from, one of which is joining us on the series at this point, which is super cool. But
so cool.
There's also... Yeah, so Kelly, since I have you, like, what's your favorite perk that you have access to, and can you just tell us a little bit about it?
Yeah, I mean, my favorite is by far doing the live episodes with you and Sunshine every month. When I get to go, I haven't been able to go very often, but whenever I do, it's so fun, and it's so uplifting. I mean, I spend all day not talking to adults, and it's just so nice. Even when I'm tired, I can talk to some people about stuff that I love, about Avatar. And it's so uplifting, and everyone's so great, and it's just allowed me to get to know the other patrons better and to actually communicate, with you guys and with them. It's such a joy. That's my favorite part, hands down.
I think that's my favorite perk also. It's just really community building is it's really nice. It's nice. I like having people that are on the same page, that like friends, and it's not always on the same page about everything, just being on the same page about like liking Avatar and liking the Dragon Prince, and willing to have honest conversation about tough things.
Yes.
I wouldn't say it's that we always agree, but rather that there's a center that we all care about, and we're all willing to kind of engage it. I think that's super neat.
Yes, everyone always brings a perspective that is definitely different from my own, and I like that. And I've definitely rethought some things that I thought about certain episodes because of what we talked about. I love it.
Yeah, me too. Me too, for sure. I really, it's doing those episodes that really make me want to re-record all of season 1. Because season 1 was such a, we were still learning,
Yeah.
And so, anyway. Okay, well, I think we have successfully arrived at the end of our episode. Thank you so much for joining. I'm really grateful. This has been a lovely conversation. Is there anything that you want to share? If people want to find you, do you want people to be able to find you on the social medias? Like, what are your thoughts? Anything you want to end with?
I mean, I'm not social media famous by any means. I do not post anything except my cat and pictures of my life. It's really boring. So, I mean, if you want to follow me on Twitter, that's where, if I say anything remotely spicy, it happens on Twitter, at CarpeDM16 with a K in Carpe. So, if you want to, but no, I just want to say thank you, Ben, for having me on the podcast. Like I said at the beginning, lifelong dream. I can't wait to listen to the other episodes that I hope you're doing with other patrons, because I hope they're awesome.
For sure.
And I'm glad that I get to be first, but also I hope that the other patrons don't listen to this and be like, I gotta do that, I gotta do it like that. No, please do it. Please do it in a way that suits you, that say some really smart things. Do some...
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you
or
so
don't,
much.
and just make me look smart. That's cool, too.
That's true. It's true. We're here to help.
Yeah, I'm here to help you. It's going to be great. It's great. I'm not saying I'm smart, but sometimes our powers combined, we do good work.
Together make one brain.
Indeed. All right. Well, this has been Bending Not Breaking. And until next time, be well and do good.